Good morning, Sinkisand, Nevis, and welcome to Inside the News. This is WinFM 98.9. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this edition. Today is Saturday, July 17th, 2021, and I am your, for today, moderator, Devon Cornelius. Today we are having a panel discussion with a number of distinguished counselors and psychologists from across St. Kitts and let me say Nevis and Nevis. And let me say to all of them, thank you guys so much for accepting our invitation. Now, the topic on the table today is mental wellness, coping with the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Mental wellness, coping with the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me say quickly, for those of you who will be interested in being a part of the discussion later on in the program, whether it be via calling or sending your questions, you can call us at 466-0989-762 or 662. You can also send us a question at info@winmediaskn.com or at WhatsApp 662-2204. Now, we have joining us today Dr. Sherilyn Crawford. We have Mr. Jeremy Thomas. We have Michelle Blake, as well as Michelle Ann Neal. Now, we have two Michelles on the program today, so I'll be referring to one as Mrs. Neal and the other as Mrs. Blake. So Mrs. Blake and Mrs. Neal, Dr. Crawford and Mr. Thomas, and I am your moderator, Mr. Cornelius. We'll begin with Mr. Thomas. Good morning, Mr. Thomas, and thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
Good morning, Mr. Cornelius, and also to the entire listening public and viewing public as well of St. Christopher Nevis. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I look forward to this discussion. It's something that is needed, something that we all, whether we're in the profession or not, is something that we all need to hear and listen and know about. So I'm willing and ready to learn from this discussion and also to be able to give my own little expertise about it as well. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Thomas. Mrs. Blake?
Hello, good morning to you, Mr. Thomas. Good morning to my other colleagues here, and good morning to everyone listening, and I guess there's some people viewing. Thanks for having us here, Mr. Cornelius. And I think, as Mr. Thomas said, this is a very relevant topic, a topic that we have to explore again and again and again, because at the end of the day, all of us are dealing with the impact of COVID. And so I hope this discussion is a rich one where we are able to, just get a handle on what is happening to us, what we see happening around us to other people, and perhaps understand how to take care of ourselves and the people that we love. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Blake. We're going to continue with Mrs. Neal. Your mic is muted.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Go ahead.
Yes, sorry about that. Good morning, everyone. I am really grateful to WinFM for this opportunity because I believe a lot of us are going through many things because of the pandemic. And we even had situations like that before. So it's like an escalation of challenges. So we really need to really take care of our emotional and mental state, especially at this time.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Neal, and of course, Dr. Crawford.
Good morning, everyone listening and viewing. It's always a pleasure for me to talk about mental health. Too often, persons don't pay attention to their mental well-being. They tend to focus a lot on physical well-being. So I'm very happy for the invitation, Mr. Cornelius, to be able to talk about mental health and also to link it with COVID-19 and other situations. I'm very excited about this conversation, and I'm hoping that the general public also would be listening and would be sending in questions, because we want to make mental health, we want to make the awareness of mental well-being very popular in the Federation, because without mental health, there is no health. So thank you again, Mr. Cornelius, and all the other persons here, colleagues, etc., discussing this topic this morning.
Awesome, and thank you so much. Let me say thank you guys again so much for accepting the invitation, and I look forward to this conversation with all of you. Now, it is 12 minutes past the hour 11, and so we're going to begin this conversation. And of course, as you are the persons who are express field, I would allow you to begin this conversation and to share with members of the public who are viewing via radio, those who are listening via radio, who are viewing via our social media platforms and who are listening via the World Wide Web. I'm going to allow you this time to share with members of the public some tips and to share your knowledge about mental wellness, coping with the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. We're going to begin the conversation this morning with the Director of the Counseling Department, Mrs. Michelle Blake. Mrs. Blake?
Okay, thanks again, Mr. Cornelius. So I am going to start the ball rolling by giving a little bit of a context, because we're talking today about mental health in COVID. And COVID is a specific and particular experience that we are all having. But let me talk about mental health first, and then of course, we broaden it to what's happening in COVID as we discuss, during the morning. So mental health is something that we all need to take care of. And when we speak about mental health, we're speaking about a person's overall state of well-being, a person's ability to be able to manage the things that are going on around them, and a person's ability to be able to balance out their lives. So that is basically what we're talking about when we're talking about mental health. It's a person's ability to deal with normal stressors, a person's ability to be productive and work fruitfully in their context. So that is mental health. Now, obviously, the COVID pandemic has impacted people's mental health. Because it has taken away people's ability to be productive, taken away people's ability to balance their lives and so forth. So there has been an impact. COVID has destabilized people. It has impacted routines and norms. These are things that people need to be able to feel balanced. It has taken people out of their comfort zone and their ability to find comfort and find a sense of balance. It has impacted children and adolescents because their own developmental norms have been impacted. It has exacerbated people who have mental illnesses, and so it's made those mental illnesses worse. And it has created pockets of vulnerability for people who are perhaps in situations that are abusive or difficult. So all of these are things that have happened, and of course, this then speaks to people, the impact on people's mental health. So when we're looking and when we're discussing this morning, we're going to be talking about what people are seeing, what people are experiencing, and what people need. People are going to be experiencing a wide range of emotions, some that they could identify and pinpoint exactly, and some which are vague and ambiguous, and they're not quite sure what it is and where it's coming from. But there definitely is a sense of angst that is surrounding countries, communities, societies, as we all deal with this. So we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about what people need, how people need to be supported as they go through the experiences that come from this. I just want to, as we're talking here, just want to indicate that people's experiences and people's responses are overall normal. So people are responding normally to an abnormal situation. So I say that because I don't want people to feel as if they have to hide their feelings or shun things that they're experiencing or just minimize them. People's experiences are normal in a very abnormal situation. So as we go through, we'll talk about the fact that there's impact on people, on individuals, on families, on vulnerable populations, and we're going to be able to have some some insight perhaps into how to deal with that. So that's my brief presentation for right now.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Blake. We're going to continue the conversation, and we're going to head over to Mr. Thomas, who is a family counselor at the counseling department here in St. Kitts. Mr. Thomas, your presentation.
Good morning. Good. Thank you again so much, Mr. Cornelius. Really, really appreciate it. I think as well also, my director, she gave a good mouthful of some of the things that, of course, is affecting persons, and of course, from the basis of mental health, and as a family counselor, having to deal with families one-on-one, having to have the hands-on approach in dealing with families within our federation, both St. Kitts and Nevis. Again, we have seen a lot of challenges. And that's one of the things I'll be able to take our presentation from, where within our families right now, they are seeing a lot of challenges because of significant factors where, of course, changing routines. One of the things, of course, my director mentioned, there have been so many different changes in routine. You know, persons can't afford to meet or see a loved one or a friend like they used to. Everything is now social distancing. You know, you gotta wear a mask, you gotta protect yourself. So what has happened again, a lot of social routines have changed. Now, persons, yes, they have been able to somewhat cope, but not to the extent, because we are not accustomed to it. So all these things are factors that have literally changing the dynamics of what family is. Because you see, again, at the end of the day, family being one of the oldest institutions globally. I mean, without the family, there won't be generations. Without generations, there won't be history. And without history, there won't be a future. So again, because of all these changes that have affected us, you know, break in communication where learning is concerned, we have literally seen the education system being affected by it. We have also seen, again, persons who are accustomed of celebrating birthdays, anniversaries, and all these other things, all these life events, they have been interrupted. And of course, the loss of security and safety is something as well we have seen within the families that have been, you know, slowly disseminated. And of course, persons have to more or less now recalibrate as to how they're going to pick themselves back up from situations like this. And then I'm hoping that, you know, throughout this discussion, we're able to just touch on some things as to how we're able, as a family counselor, and even as professionals within our field and within the scope of the topic, as to how we'll be able to provide and give persons suggestions in stability and support and suggestions for a lot of parents. Because one of the things that we do as family counselors is that we focus a lot on high-risk children, high-risk youth and families and so on. So we want to be able on this platform today to present, you know, how as a family counselor, we will be able to give support to that parent or parents who know that their child, they have been out of their house when the pandemic wasn't even a thing. But now that they're in the house, it's almost as if they're still outside of their house at the same time. I know it sounds weird, but it's happening, you know. So we want to be able to speak on that and give some pointers, give some steps as to how, you know, parents, you know, families in general could cope in this epidemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. We're going to continue with Michelle Ann Neal, also a counselor at the counseling department in St. Kitts.
Good morning again. What I want to focus on today is family resilience, because as much as all of these challenges are happening, families have that capability to basically cope with some of these things. Sometimes we just have to basically ignite these things. And if you think back to olden days, our grandparents would have gone through all of these different struggles and they found a way to deal with them. They came together as a family. Maybe they used different rituals to heal from whatever is happening. So that is basically my focus. I'm thinking about the COVID-19 pandemic as, say, for example, you're by the riverside and you're throwing pebbles into the water. Every pebble disturbs the water. It's disturbing your life, disturbing that normal that you know. Here comes COVID-19, one big boulder, we throw it in the river, everything is thrown off. Now families have this ability, okay, this big thing happens, so now they have to create this new normal, this new way of adapting and this new way of coping. So really that's my focus today, and the fact that families have all of these hidden strengths, and we just need to pull them out to get them to cope in the pandemic.
Awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Neal. We're going to continue with Dr. Sharon Crawford, a clinical psychologist. Dr. Crawford, you may begin.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Thomas outlined some of the challenges that persons are facing in terms of changing social routines, in terms of, maybe joblessness. There's also uncertainty in terms of contracting the virus. Are they going to contract the virus or not? Uncertainty about the future, etc. And these are some of the things that persons are facing. And what I really liked about what Mrs. Blake said that we were going to continue discussing is normalizing these responses, these emotional responses. What I look forward to discussing is to further discuss some of these emotional responses. Let persons know that these are normal, because we are aware that persons do experience fear, worry, and stress associated with COVID-19. So as we look at these, as we go forward, these emotional responses as we go forward, I would like to discuss a bit more about some of these, how stress is experienced, and also to give some ideas as to how persons can cope with these emotional distress that they might be feeling as they go through COVID-19. Thank you.
Right, thank you so much, Dr. Crawford. Now it is 24 minutes past the hour of 11 in our studios. We are going to pause for a break to acknowledge the sponsors of this program, and when we come back, we're going to get into the meat of the matter. Take this short break, and we will be right back.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
Insurance Company Limited. We care about your investment. Guarantee you peace of mind. The best team in the business. Guarantee you peace of mind. No other company will guarantee you peace of mind. Together we'll succeed and guarantee you peace of mind. CDC Insurance Company Limited, where you get more coverage for less. People make the world go.
Good morning again, St. Kitts and Nevis, and welcome back to Inside the News. We're having a panel discussion on the topic mental wellness, coping with the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. And I do believe that this is a very timely discussion, as we've been hearing about different things happening, not just here in St. Kitts and Nevis, but across the Caribbean region, in the context of COVID-19, many families have been displaced, and we are now going to have a conversation on ways where you can learn how to cope with the new normal, because we know that this is going to be here for some time. And so we have to not just learn how to live with COVID in terms of following the non-pharmaceutical measures, but living with the new normal of, the social distancing, not being able to see families, not being able to do things that you did prior to the pandemic. So we are going to have this conversation. No, I wanted to bring up some different scenarios of situations that may be occurring in Caribbean households, in households here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And I wanted to get your professional feedback and or guidance on the way forward, or as a topic suggests, how to cope with this challenge. Now, you are a household of, let's say, 5. My mom worked at a restaurant. My dad worked actually in the tourism sector at a hotel. The children were at CFBC or the Nevis Sixth Form College, and everything was going fine because mommy was working, daddy was working, and so income was steady for the most part, because in the tourism sector you have the good season, and so income was steady for the most part. Now you're in a situation where the restaurant was closed for a year because of slow business. The hotel was closed for a year. Not only that, daddy was made redundant, and so it's hard to pay the bills, it's hard to buy food, it's hard to deal with that huge boulder that has now come into your life. Instead of small little pebbles, this is now a huge boulder. What do you suggest, or how do you suggest we cope with this going forward? Who would like to tackle this scenario? Mrs. Blake, will that be you?
Okay, I was just about to say, I think I'll start off.
Okay.
All right. So, Mr. Cornelius, you described a situation that is pretty much what we're hearing just all around. And what you're describing is the financial impact of COVID. So that's what you're describing. A job was there. As a result of the job, we've been able to provide for our families. Everything was going as it should have been. Then all of a sudden, you have that normalcy and that comfort just pulled from underneath you, right? And so you're in a situation now where you're no longer able to provide. And of course, your life and the life of your children is destabilized. So one of the things I know when I've spoken to people in those situations is, even though it's about the finances having changed, and that is the first thing that people see and hear and so forth, as I speak with people in those situations and sort of peel back the layers, the impact on them is on what it means to their concept of self to no longer be able to provide for their family. And that is one of the things that I've heard. So, we don't have a job anymore, or the income has been reduced. And all of a sudden now, my role as a parent, my role as a father, my role as a mother, and all of the esteem and the concept of self that goes into that has been thrown off. And so I am struggling. So one of the things I know that we do in those kinds of situations is go to something that Mrs. Neal indicated when she started. Try and talk with families about their resilience. So a lot of things are going to have to happen in this scenario. we're going to have to pull on resilience, because sometimes people, I mean, COVID is like nothing that we have ever experienced anywhere in the world. But what we do know is that people have had experiences where they have had to pull on their resilience, where they've had to pull on their way of being creative, where they've had to pull on family support, where they've had to pull on finding another way to look at a situation. And so in a situation like this, outside of the very real suggestions about how they can get the financial help and their agencies and so forth that provide that, I think with a family, helping them to recognize that this situation, while it is very much present, could be looked at something for them to rebuild how they see themselves as family, how they see themselves as providers and caretakers, how they see connecting the resources that they have that perhaps they didn't realize that they need or they never used before, because, again, as I said, a situation like this never came up before. So it's about reframing, it's about finding strength, it's about being creative in how to feel as if you're still taking care of your family. And I'm going to pause there for a minute, but that is the way that I go from it from a mental health perspective.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Blake. Thank you so much for that. I wanted to bring up another scenario that I think is common, and COVID-19, in my opinion, has made it worse. No, some children find their comfort zone at school. Some children, they become themselves when they are at school. They feel comfortable being around their friends. They feel safe being around, the teachers and the staff at the school. But now they're home. And so they can't go to school anymore because of the social distancing protocols. I know, yes, schools, opened in here in St. Kitts and Nevis, but we're looking at the context of, if schools were closed. And so you feel safe when you're at school. You feel that everything is all right, everything is calm, everything is cool when you're at school. But now you're at home, and you may be living in a situation where you're a part of a household where your parents or siblings are abusive. And when I say children, I'm not necessarily just talking about children at the primary school level, but I'm talking about children at the secondary or even at the tertiary level. So how do you deal with that? Coming from being uprooted from your comfort zone, which was school, and now having to continue school, but you're not in your comfort zone anymore. How do you deal with that? Anyone wants to tackle that one?
I get it. All right. I'll take it. Of course, it's pretty much something that within my list of the presentation, I definitely had to discuss, because again, it's very serious knowing these are some of the things that our families are actually facing, where the situation is that the whole issue of being online or the online platforms that have somewhat gone to a peak that no one ever expected before. The solutions for that, they have been very, very limited. And unfortunately, of course, the learning environment for virtual productivity has somewhat become inadequate to some extent because of lack of resources, lack of access to connectivity, and some persons who are without a laptop, a tablet, and all these other challenges they're faced with. And the thing is too, as you said, as you touched in the light of abuse, which would fall in line, because everything is connected from the previous scenario that you gave, and of course, my director was able to clearly state that, listen, from having to deal with a mental issue to know what the family now is dealing with in reality is that the internet itself, it has also lent its handout to sexual exploitation, cyberbullying, online risk-taking behaviors and exposure to potentially harmful content that they should never even expose themselves to in the first place. So what's happening right now is that sometimes the children, yes, from a particular time to a particular time, they're online with their school and so on and so forth. But then when that is over, no one is there to supervise them. If one of the hardest challenges is supervision on as to where the children they are online, their parents, as you said, having to not have a job for the last year or so. They're not having to think of all these different opportunities that they could use with their hands. So with that being the case, in order to provide for their family, they have to leave home. So what's happening now? Children are exposed to some dangers that are online. Even though while it may be good knowing that they're home online doing their schooling, at the same time, some children I know they're literally online, but they're not there. Their cameras are off when they do something because they're using it to their advantage. All right, and so with that, you finding the coping abilities within the family has been so much limited. As I remember saying this to my barber just this week, I said, you know what? COVID is teaching us that living with each other is totally different than knowing each other. Right? Yeah. So this in terms of the family, this is actually happening. How do we cope with that? Families have to now realize that they have to find ways in order to understand each other more. It's not the norm, and I'm going to be short now. It's not the norm where, of course, the parents are out from 8 to 4, 8 to 5. And then by the time they come home, they know, okay, it's cooking, cleaning, get the homeworks done, get your skin bathed, go to the bathroom. It's no more that. It's a 24-hour round the clock, being with you, staying with you, seeing how you actually how you behave and all this other stuff. So parents now, they are now forced to spend time, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing because we have to learn now how to normalize that action as well. And this is one of the things as a family comes, and my colleague and I and others, including our director, who really, really is a good support on that. Help families to find a way, not just to cope, but to be able to normalize their situation so that it doesn't affect them, of course, on the mental aspect of their health. All right. So again, how do they cope? They have to be able to find ways, and I hope some along the way within our discussion we were able to give some really good pointers and suggestions. But they're now forced to find ways in making sure that their children are doing what they're supposed to do. They are doing what they're supposed to do while still in the position where they have to provide for their families and so on and so forth. Thank you.
I would just like to add
Sure.
also to what Mr. Thomas is saying, because he has really explained, a reality that is so real for us here in St. Kitts. And when we talk about mental health, we don't just talk about mental health, we talk about mental health and psychosocial support. And that latter part is very important too. What jumped out at me with the scenario you gave was the part about living in a situation where there is some form of abuse, and you didn't elaborate what type of abuse is there. But what I want to say is that children have the right to feel safe and secure in their homes. And we want children to know that if there's any form of abuse, that is important that they speak up. They need to speak out about it. They could always call the police or call social services hotline number, etc., and speak out so they can get help, because it's not right for children to be living in situations of abuse. So that's one thing I really want to add because of that aspect that you outlined in the scenario about abuse. And then later we could come up with creative ways as to how they could cope also.
Yeah. Mr. Cornelius, I also wanted to add something to that scenario.
Go ahead.
Because you described it, and rightfully so, as children wanting to be around their peers and their friends and their teachers and so forth. So I am going to change the word want to need. They need it as a part of their development. That interaction with peers, the ability to bounce things off of people, teenagers, their ability to bounce things off of their peers, the ability to interact with people who are at the same stage that they are, is a facilitative developmental aspect of adolescence. For children, the ability to play with each other in the school ground or in the class helps to facilitate very normal life skills, cooperating, sharing, managing conflict. So school and being around peers isn't only about something that they want, it is something that they need. And so with the impact of their ability to do that, we are recognizing that there has been impact on children. And as Dr. Crawford said, as we go along, we could talk about some specific things, but there has been impact on children. Parents are describing their children, sometimes they see children as being more withdrawn. Parents are describing children as perhaps what they describe as acting out. Parents are describing behaviors that speak to the fact that this normalcy for them, this need in their development has been interrupted. And just be, not to prolong it too much, but one of the things we're gonna have to do as adults is not to minimize the loss that children experience when they don't have that peer interaction. In other words, it's not for us to say, well, it's only school, or it's just your friends, or whatever it is. Not to minimize it, because in the world of a child or the world of a teenager, these are huge losses. And so when we see the acting out, or when we see the isolation, or the acting in, or the separating from self, what we are seeing is children responding to loss, children responding to devastation, children responding to the fact that there is imbalance in their world. And we have to recognize that for what it is and deal with it honestly.
Right, thank you so much, Mrs. Blake. If there are no other additions to that, we'll take this short break to say thank you to the sponsors for this program. And when we come back, we are going to continue this conversation. Let us take this break and we will be back shortly.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
TDC Automotive is paying for you. Deposit? We're paying. 3-month installments? We're paying. Pay nothing for 3 months because we are paying. Take a moment, catch your breath, and roll out with ease. Save over $20,000 off your new Toyota Hiace because TDC Automotive is paying. Get your Toyota Hiace today. TDC Automotive, #1 for a reason. Terms and conditions apply.
People make the world go
Welcome back to Inside the News on WinFM 98.9. We are getting close to the 12 o'clock hour where we will pause for the headline news and come back thereafter. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. For those of you tuned in late, you're listening to Inside the News. I am your host for today, but in this capacity, I'm serving as the moderator where we are discussing mental wellness, coping with the challenges brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have some counselors and psychologists. We have Dr. Sherilyn Crawford, Mr. Jeremy Thomas, Mrs. Michelle Blake, and Mrs. Michelle Ann Neal from the counseling department here in St. Kitts. Now, I want to bring up a different scenario. I'm not sure if you guys deal with this one on a regular basis. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So this is what I want to bring up. Now, I'm a retired civil servant. I'm in my 70s. I live alone. I enjoy my pension. I enjoy my Social Security benefits. I enjoy my life savings. I have a nice car, a nice home. But since the pandemic, things have really changed for me. Why? Because prior to the pandemic, I would enjoy spending time with family, particularly my children who all lived here in St. Kitts. But because of the pandemic, they lost their jobs and they were forced to migrate to different islands to live. Now you will realize that automatically I don't have anybody much to talk to because most of my friends that I know have passed. Some have moved to different countries. So no, I'm in a situation where, I don't have a problem financially because I have a steady income. I don't have a problem where, I can't have a roof over my head. So COVID hasn't affected me financially. It hasn't affected me physically or educationally. But I went from having friends and close family around me to now being all by myself. What is your suggestion to that? Who wants to tackle this one?
Okay.
Dr. Crawford?
Oh, she wanted to
Can you go ahead?
Yes.
Okay.
We have to remember that with age comes this heightened feeling of isolation and loneliness. And then COVID comes with it too, because with the social distancing, and then given the scenario with this man at this particular age, he's considered unsafe out in the public like that. As remember, they said, over 60, it's best for you to stay home, all of that. So I think this is where technology comes into play, because having him, he's alone at home, you can't go out because then you're risking your life. So technology would be the best way to deal with that. So then they could have this is where they could probably bring back the family rituals that they used to have physically, and they could do these things online. All of these little things. A simple thing as each of them sitting around a dinner table, wherever they are, talking about the meal that each of them is about to eat. And we could talk about maybe this is the grandfather or the father. You could talk about maybe this is grandma's old recipe. Remember how this is cooked? I think that that little interaction there feeds into driving away that sense of loneliness.
Okay. And in addition to that, what Miss Michelle has said, and those are definitely some tips as to what persons can do to help them to cope. We would really want persons to try and focus sometimes on what they have control over, because too often persons are looking at situations and all the things that are impossible, or the things that they don't have, or the things that are not available. But if we could get them to focus on what is under their control, what they can manipulate, that would help to give them some idea as to how they could go forward. We spoke about being resilient also before, and that is that ability to bounce back from difficult situations. And that's one way we can work with this person to help them to bounce back, tap into that ability that we all have as human beings to bounce back from difficult situations. And I have seen that through this COVID-19 experience, a lot of persons have been able to become even more creative. That is one thing that has come out of it. So sometimes things that are meant to maybe cause us distress, there's also an opportunity to grow from these things. And if we are able to have conversations with this person to help him to tap into some of those resources and some of those strengths that he has, we could come up with a plan together, including some of the things that Miss Michelle said earlier about tapping into technology, and who knows, maybe tapping into church group or community groups or family group chats where you can have video calls, etc. These we can all tap into if we're able to have conversations with that person and help to bring to the surface all the strengths that they do possess.
Yes. And I wanted to add something to that too.
Sure.
You started off by talking about the person having not been impacted by COVID financially. And so, you know,
Yes.
there is this sense of, well, maybe I don't have anything to complain about. And I wanted to tap into that because I think what we hear a lot when we hear about COVID and COVID's impact is, and I think I started talking about it earlier when you gave the first scenario, people go immediately to the financial impact, and it's understandable as to why. But here you are, and you have this person who has their monthly needs met, and they have a roof over their head. So they're not impacted financially. But at the same time, there is some angst. There is a feeling of being off balance. One of the things that I have found that COVID has exposed, or perhaps maybe reinforced is the word that I should use, is that we as human beings are intricately tied to so many things in terms of how we relate to people, so many little things, that when COVID came along and those little things were no longer in our space, all of us felt this unease, and we had to deal with the unease. And so you have a situation here, as you said, where there is an impact emotionally, mentally, on the person who has everything. And you may hear from somebody else, well, why, you shouldn't be affected because your monthly income was not impacted.